My name is Nancy, and my life was turned upside down when I found out my husband, Terry, had been unfaithful. We had been high school sweethearts, together for 7 years before we got married, and everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, one of Terry's employees contacted me with irrefutable proof of his affair. Terry wasn't just any man, he was a well-respected businessman in our small town. To protect their identities, I've changed the names of those involved in this story, so you'll read about Terry, my soon-to-be ex-husband, and Michelle, his mother. The revelation of Terry's infidelity hit me like a punch to the gut. For an entire week, I was in shock, unable to wrap my mind around it. But the person who finally shattered my denial was none other than Terry himself. In a casual tone, he told me he wanted a divorce, claiming he didn't love me anymore and had already made up his mind. I was speechless, asking him why, hoping there had been some kind of mistake. His answer was blunt: he simply didn't love me anymore. When I confronted him about the affair, his face drained of color. He hadn't expected me to know, and his reaction quickly shifted from shock to denial. He insisted he wasn't in love with me and wanted a divorce for that reason alone. But I wasn't about to let him walk away so easily, not after all the years I'd invested in our marriage. I reminded him of the prenuptial agreement we'd signed, which, ironically, had been his idea to protect himself in case of divorce. At the time, I saw it as reasonable, never imagining it would eventually be used against him. Now that the tables had turned, Terry tried to convince me to settle things amicably, asking me to overlook the terms of the prenup. Clearly, he was worried about the consequences of his actions being exposed. I was at a crossroads, facing the end of what I had once believed was a perfect marriage, but also realizing it was time to reclaim my life and dignity. I had never intended to cheat, which is why I had agreed to the prenup in the first place. Little did Terry know, the tables would eventually turn, and he'd find himself caught in his own affair. According to my research, Terry's new partner could easily be mistaken for a supermodel. I couldn't help but think, good for him, trying to find some humor in this painful situation. But as much as discovering Terry's betrayal hurt, it didn't break me. It fueled a fire inside me, a fiery determination to stand up for myself. My feelings of love for him were gone, replaced with a resolve to hold him accountable. Terry's desire to leave me for his mistress while avoiding the financial consequences of our prenup only fueled my anger. I made it clear I wasn't letting him off the hook. His attempts to convince me to ignore his betrayal for a clean break were futile. I had the evidence, and I was ready to use it. Terry's reaction was one of frustration and defiance. "Damn you, Nancy," he snapped, wishing I would just let him move on peacefully. But how could I? Especially after he insisted on the prenup to protect himself, and now he was the one at fault. His threats to make things difficult for me if I pursued my rightful share only strengthened my resolve. After he stormed out, likely off to be with his mistress, I was overwhelmed by emotions I had been trying to suppress. I cried, not just from sadness, but from anger and disbelief at how wrong I had been to choose Terry as my partner. Despite everything I had given him, I refused to let him have the last word. In search of support, I reached out to Michelle, my mother-in-law. Unlike the stereotype of the difficult in-law, Michelle was kind-hearted, generous, and deeply respected. Though incredibly wealthy, she was the opposite of her son in character. Despite my fears of losing her, given my past experiences with abandonment, I decided to confide in her. Though I didn't reveal the full extent of Terry's betrayal, Michelle, ever the loving and compassionate woman, encouraged reconciliation. But as much as I appreciated her support, I found myself torn. If I revealed everything, it might alienate Michelle, the one person I couldn't bear to lose. Despite Michelle's well-meaning attempts at mediation, I knew deep down that reconciling with Terry was no longer an option. The path ahead seemed uncertain, but I was resolute in facing it with dignity and asserting my rights. Armed with irrefutable evidence and a clear conscience, I knew I had to take control of my life. After discovering the truth about Terry, I made the decision to leave his house and start fresh in my own apartment. During this turbulent period, Michelle, my mother-in-law, became an unexpected source of support. Initially, I had feared she might side with her son, but she surprised me with her reaction. One day, she urgently called to meet me at my new place. Her tone was heavy with concern, and when she arrived, she looked particularly somber. She revealed that she had something important to discuss about Terry, and before she could delve into it, I preempted her by telling her that I already knew about the affair. I explained that I had evidence from one of his employees. Michelle was visibly taken aback. She had only recently learned about Terry's betrayal and the divorce from him. Her immediate reaction was one of self-reproach. She blamed herself for not raising him better and broke down in tears. Seeing her so devastated, I felt an overwhelming sense of compassion for her. Michelle had always been more than just a mother-in-law to me, she had become family, offering the maternal support I cherished. In that moment, we shared an emotional bond that deepened our connection. As Michelle composed herself, she hesitated, as though there was something even more serious that she was afraid to reveal. Sensing her apprehension, I reassured her that I respected her completely and encouraged her to confide in me. What she revealed next left me in shock. Terry, in a spiral of bitterness and revenge, had come up with a plan to entrap me, aiming to have me arrested. The very thought of Terry plotting against me was like a nightmare coming to life. It was as if I had never truly known him. The man I had loved for so long now seemed like a stranger. Michelle's decision to stand by me and expose her son's scheme only strengthened our bond. Her actions not only demonstrated her integrity, but they also ensured that the divorce would not sever the familial ties we had built. As I processed the weight of her revelation, I realized that the woman who had once been my mother-in-law was now a steadfast ally, offering me a sense of security and understanding in the face of a heartbreaking betrayal. I never imagined I could be so wrong about someone. Michelle's revelation about Terry's sinister plan only deepened my fears. His scheme was even more devious than I had anticipated. He intended to stash some of his money in my new apartment and then tip off the police, hoping to have me implicated. His goal was clear: protect his assets from being divided in the divorce. Our prenuptial agreement included a clause that would nullify it if either party was found at fault, and Terry thought he could manipulate this to his advantage. He had confided his plan to Michelle, assuming she would keep it secret. Michelle was horrified by her son's audacity and assured me of her unwavering support. She condemned Terry's actions and expressed her shame for him. Her solidarity in the face of such betrayal was a much-needed silver lining amidst the chaos. She reassured me that nothing could sever the bond we had formed. She saw me as the daughter she never had. Her determination to stand by me against Terry's malicious intent gave me strength. With Michelle's encouragement, I crafted a plan to counter Terry's plot. Although I was concerned she might hesitate to support a strategy that could implicate her son, Michelle's response was unexpectedly supportive. She agreed that the plan was necessary to protect myself and expose Terry's deceit. To safeguard my interests and collect evidence, I decided to install security cameras in my apartment. The building already had CCTV in the common areas, but I needed to focus on covering the interior. With help from a friend, I set up the system, ensuring that every corner was under surveillance. Terry eventually made his move. He arrived pretending to want to discuss the divorce, but his intentions were transparent. I played along, curious to see him carry out his plan. While I briefly stepped into the kitchen, I watched him through the corner of my eye as he stealthily placed something in my desk drawer. Instead of confronting him immediately, I let him believe his plot was going smoothly. I knew the cameras were recording everything. Once Terry hastily left, as aggravating as ever, I reviewed the footage. My heart raced as I confirmed whether he had planted the cash in my apartment. This critical piece of evidence could turn the tables on him. The footage would expose his plot and guarantee his plan's failure. I didn't inspect the money myself, intending to claim ignorance if the police got involved. I checked the location through my phone and, sure enough, Terry had hidden the cash in my desk. Fury surged within me, but I also felt an immense sense of gratitude toward Michelle. Without her forewarning, I might never have seen this treachery coming. I would have been blindsided and defenseless against Terry's accusations if not for the evidence I had securely saved. With everything in place, I waited for Terry's next move. As expected, the police arrived the following day. Accompanied by Terry, I greeted them, surprised by their presence, and inquired how I could assist. The officers explained that Terry had accused me of stealing $3,500 from him. I stood firm, denying any involvement with the money and stressing that theft went against my principles. Terry, impatient and agitated by the officers' impartial stance, accused me outright of lying. He claimed that theft was habitual for me and a major reason for our divorce. His audacity was staggering. He directly challenged me, certain that his plot would trap me. However, Terry's confidence was misplaced. When the officers asked for my side of the story and hinted at a possible search for the cash, Terry insisted that I would be exposed and arrested, expecting my imminent downfall, but the tide was about to turn. I assured the officers of my innocence, promising to reveal the truth and offering tangible proof of the real sequence of events. Despite Terry's protests and attempts to dismiss my claims, urging the officers to arrest me on the spot, the police remained professional, willing to examine the evidence I had prepared. Terry's underestimation of me was about to unravel spectacularly. I guided the officers to my workspace, prepared to disclose the video footage that would demonstrate not only my innocence, but also Terry's deceitful scheme to entrap me. This moment was poised to redefine the entire situation, exposing Terry's manipulation and fully vindicating me. When the officers mentioned the need for an investigation before making any arrests, Terry's fleeting moment of unease quickly dissolved back into indignation. It was clear that the officers were not swayed by his impatience or his eagerness to see me arrested. I led them to the area where Terry had hidden the cash, confident that his scheme would backfire. For a brief moment, Terry's smugness resurfaced, convinced he had me cornered. However, I acknowledged the money's presence, but clarified that I hadn't placed it there. I informed the officers about the surveillance system I had installed throughout my apartment, explaining that I had done so independently, without anyone else's consent. This setup, I assured them, would not only prove my innocence, but also identify the true culprit behind the money's placement. At the mention of the surveillance, Terry's confidence faltered, but he quickly dismissed the need to review the footage, arguing that the discovery of the money was enough evidence to implicate me. However, the officers corrected him, insisting on conducting their duties without interference and expressing a willingness to view the footage to gain a clearer understanding of the events. I quickly handed my phone to the officers, showing them the recorded footage that revealed how the cash ended up in my closet. My precautions had ensured that any personal moments were kept private, so I felt no hesitation in presenting the evidence. Terry, caught off guard by the existence of the footage and uncertain of its contents, anxiously awaited the officers' response as they reviewed it. His confident facade began to crumble, exposing his underlying panic. The video clearly depicted the events as they had unfolded, showcasing my innocence and implicating Terry in an attempt to frame me. This turn of events not only exonerated me, but also shifted the officers' focus toward Terry. Dismantling his narrative, the officers confronted him with the evidence, stating, "It appears you were the one who placed the money in her closet, intending to have your wife arrested." Terry's protests and denials faltered as the undeniable proof weighed heavily against him. He fumbled for an explanation, but his fear escalated as the officers outlined the potential legal consequences he now faced, including charges for misuse of police resources, harassment, and defamation against me. His initial bravado gave way to panic, his attempts to dismiss the footage as an error falling flat. The police, unimpressed by his backpedaling, turned their attention to me. They asked if I wished to press charges. Terry, now desperate, shifted from defiance to pleading, his eyes filled with a silent cry for leniency. Despite the clear opportunity to take legal action, I hesitated, pondering the ramifications. "It's a misunderstanding," I suggested, hoping to resolve things without further entanglement. The officers, however, reminded me that the decision was mine, emphasizing my right to seek justice for the wrongs Terry had committed. Faced with the reality of his situation, Terry frantically suggested a private resolution. "Nancy, we can sort this out ourselves. No need to involve the police," he urged, his voice tinged with urgency. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Why not, Terry? You were quick to involve them without cause," I countered, pointing out his baseless accusations and the serious implications of his scheme. Terry's admission that he made a dumb mistake was nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid the consequences of his actions. A last-ditch effort to salvage what little remained of his credibility. He explained his actions as a way to level the playing field in our divorce, fearing I would have the upper hand. When he mentioned his fear of me gaining advantages in the divorce, I couldn't hide my disdain. "I hope she's worth it," I said, referring to his new partner, and the lengths he had gone to for her. The shock of realizing he was about to face legal consequences drained the color from his face. I informed the officers of my decision to press charges, and they promptly handcuffed him. His reaction, a mix of tears and desperate pleas, was both pitiful and repulsive to witness. Any lingering pity I might have felt for him evaporated as I saw his true colors, especially after learning of his affair. His hollow apologies did nothing to sway me as the police led him away. After his departure, I reached out to Michelle to update her on the situation. She wasn't surprised by the developments, but I felt it was necessary to caution her about the potential fallout. Terry's inevitable release on bail might lead him straight to her, possibly suspecting her involvement in his arrest. Michelle, ever steadfast, was ready for any confrontation. She even expressed her willingness to sever ties with her son if necessary, determined to stand up for what was right. "If Terry chooses to cut me off for standing up for what's right, it's a loss he'll have to bear," she said, her resolve clear. Michelle's disappointment in Terry had reached its peak, signaling a profound shift in their relationship. Her stance showed just how disillusioned she was with his actions, marking the end of any tolerance she had left for him. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Michelle revealed she was thinking of disinheriting him. "I'm thinking of disinheriting him," she said, expressing her unwillingness to let someone who had shattered their lives benefit from her wealth. Hearing Michelle's decision was overwhelming. It was reassuring to know there was someone firmly in my corner, ready to stand against the injustice I had faced. Michelle, more than just a mother-in-law, had become a source of comfort and a steadfast ally. We began to plan a post-divorce trip, starting with one together, which felt like the first step toward healing. As for Terry, I chose not to sue him, using the situation instead as leverage to expedite our divorce. The prenuptial agreement worked in my favor, securing me a substantial portion of our assets and ensuring he covered my legal expenses. His devious plans backfired, leaving him not only financially depleted but also losing his affair partner once she realized the financial impact of his actions. The fallout from our divorce, his affair, and his arrest caused a rift within his family. Many distanced themselves, unable to condone his actions. A significant confrontation with Michelle ended with her disowning him, severing the last remnants of their family connection. For me, this period marked a transformation. The divorce secured my financial independence and allowed me to forge a stronger bond with Michelle. Our travels, from California to a planned trip to Italy, have become a source of joy and healing. While I paused dating to focus on my mental health, life has been fulfilling, each day bringing new lessons and opportunities to grow independently.